Hello and welcome to GREENFLEET Talks. My name is Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today, and I'm delighted to be joined by Steve Beadle, Head of OZone at the Grosvenor Group. Hi Steve, lovely to see you again.
And you, Kate, good morning.
Good morning. Right, today, Steve, you and I are discussing some of the challenges that public sector fleets are facing when it comes to decarbonisation, something that I'm sure the Grosvenor Group has got experience of. So, I mean, it's quite often the case that public sector is expected to lead by example when it comes to decarbonisation, and they've got some very strict and impending targets. But they also have a very unique and diverse set of challenges regarding fleet decarbonisation. So, in your experience, what are the challenges that they face?
Yeah, I guess the problem is that public sector bodies, as you say, do have a very diverse range of vehicles, and clearly they'll be scrutinised due to being funded by the taxpayer, which ultimately will make their move to electric quite complex. On one hand, the public sector are expected to lead by example by having a zero emission fleet. But on the other hand, they're also under huge pressure to meet their obligations to provide public services, which can become challenging when moving to electric. It's not just about suitable vehicles; it's also about the infrastructure, managing those public expectations while also ensuring that those critical services do remain. And also, grey fleet. They'll make a large proportion of any public sector fleets, and with the rising cost of living, many employees may be looking to buy cheaper second-hand, higher-emitting cars for their business use.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll pick up on the grey fleet issue in a minute. I mean, you mentioned this kind of diversity of fleets, and some of the services are absolutely essential for the for local authorities, and they simply can't afford to have downtime on those vehicles. So how can public sector organisations begin their fleet decarbonisation in a way that tackles that?
I mean, in some respects, it'll be very similar to many private sector fleets that are under huge pressure to meet targets from their customers. I guess the main difference comes back to the scrutiny that the public sector will be under due to the spending of public money. But what is key is to have a clear, we've mentioned this before, I think, Kate, is to have a clear strategy and to map out all of the vehicles, look at where they're driven, what kind of work they're doing, and what charge infrastructure is either available now or potentially being developed in the future locally. All of this will allow for an EV switch program that can be mapped out, identifying some quick potential easy wins all the way through to the more challenging areas, which will likely result in a gradual transition rather than a wholesale shift. But where full electric vehicles aren't feasible right now, potentially because of mileages or the type of vehicle required, then we do encourage hybrid or low emission vehicles. And again, right now, rather than committing to another 3 or 4 year lease on a diesel vehicle, consider some flexible leasing in the form of short-term contracts, just to get us over this, this small hurdle until an EV is potentially available. But all of it.
Yeah, Steve, I think that's really good advice, because I mean, generally speaking, when you think of the passenger car market, there's a lot of choice there now, and it shouldn't be that difficult. But perhaps with some of the vans or larger vehicles, you're right. But so it does make sense to say, well, don't procure on a 4 or 5 year cycle. Just go for a shorter period, because we know that these vehicles are coming, and we're seeing a lot more. We're seeing a lot more vans coming to market with better payloads already.
Yeah, the rate that technology accelerates now, is a great pace, and it's exciting, really.
Yeah, Great. So you mentioned GreyFleet. It does seem that particularly within the public sector, a lot of employees use their own vehicles for business travel. How can the public sector reduce this reliance on GreyFleet?
I mean, yeah, we touched on it, about the cost of living. I think we're all feeling, but a salary sacrifice scheme, if that was to be implemented, is certainly something that should be considered. It's by far the cheapest way for an employee to procure an EV, and if promoted and communicated correctly, then a scheme will be very successful. Car sharing, as you say, is a great way of reducing the use of GreyFleet vehicles, either through an in-house operated scheme, or there are companies who will provide a managed service which removes any internal administration burden. We also see mobility as a solution, as another strong option, offering employees an app that enables them to get from A to B using the public network. But of course, that won't be for everybody if you have employees who are carrying equipment. But again, certainly something to consider.
Yeah.
And then I guess finally, anyone that's travelling to an appointment should really ask themselves, do they need to go in the first place, and whether they can meet over Zoom or Teams like we are today.
Exactly. I completely agree with you, Steve. I'm so pleased that you mentioned salary sacrifice, because it is my favourite thing, and it is, as you've quite rightly highlighted, just the ideal solution for taking carbon emissions out of that GreyFleet. I mean, it used to be just called salary sacrifice, but really it is EV salary sacrifice these days, isn't it? In terms of, because the incentives are so good from a tax point of view, if you go for an all-electric car on a salary sacrifice scheme, that almost everybody is. So it's been such a huge success. I almost wonder, are there any public sector fleets who don't have it already?
There will be some. We're trying to talk to as many as we can to sort of drive that change and promote the scheme. But yeah, as you say, the benefit in kind tax advantages that are there and will be there for many years should be taken advantage of right now. And as you say, it's generally a salary sacrifice EV scheme that we see. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I agree. So the other thing, particularly with local authorities, is not only do they have to decarbonise their own fleet and their own employee emissions, but they also have this wonderful task of being responsible for public charging infrastructure for people who are travelling within their authority. A report last year from Liberty Charge identified that only 14% of local authorities have dedicated staff working on EV infrastructure. So this is the commissioning and the implementation of the infrastructure. What support do you think local authorities should get when it comes to EV infrastructure for public?
Yeah, the study was, I guess, quite concerning, really, as I think it revealed that only 10% of the charge points that were targeted by government had been installed so far. And I think the research showed that 3/4 of the local authorities that were interviewed claimed monetary issues as a barrier to the adoption, along with lack of guidance. So, yeah, that coupled is a real problem, because if the infrastructure falls short, then this will only hamper the wider adoption for both public and private sector. And personally, I think there should perhaps be a greater collaboration between local authorities and the public sector, private sector, just to help with the overall understanding about future requirements. We've got some really good initiatives that have been implemented with where new build homes, new workplaces, new supermarkets are all required to have provisions for electric charge points, and they're key to supporting local authorities. Particularly that we're seeing, the increasing number of commercial fleets are converting So to support that commercial vehicle sector, workplace public charging will be key. Allow it to accelerate.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Steve. I think it is worrying, and it's something that we've talked about in other GreenFleet forums recently, because a lot of the local authorities are kind of doing their own thing, and there are pockets of brilliance, and then there are effectively infrastructure deserts by local authority. It did strike me, Steve, that of course, if a local authority has a salary sacrifice scheme and they see a lot of their own employees actually becoming EV drivers, they may suddenly have a better awareness of the challenges and the importance of this infrastructure. So it's a bit of a virtuous circle in that sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, Steve, thank you very much for your insight today. As always, it has been a pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure. No, it's been great. Thank you.
Thank you, of course, to the Grosvenor Group for joining GreenFleet Talks, and thank you for watching. Please tune in to GF365 again soon.